Warning, this video contains flashing lights which may not be suitable for people with photosensitive epilepsy. Viewer discretion is advised. Are you ready for some psychedelic visuals? This is not your average video synth. The Recursion Studio is more like a hallucination studio, an effortless way to create real-time trippy visuals, no computer required. With the ability to sync to incoming audio right off the bat, this is going to be great for any artist looking to add visuals to their live performance. Designed and built in Brooklyn, New York by Entropy Sons, I'm super psyched to feature this device coming from a local maker. There's a lot going on under the hood here with a ton of processing modules and, as of right now, 6 unique instruments. But if I can figure it out, you definitely can too. Alright, let's check it out. So the way the interface is laid out, basically you have these 5 knobs and the 5 pads. Each of these knobs are infinitely rotating and can be pressed to reset. Usually the pads trigger macros to affect the patch, like in this default patch, when I press the button it animates the image. Then over here you have this gold encoder which highlights things for you in the interface, and when you press it down it'll make a selection for you. Then no matter where you are, you have these 2 smaller buttons, which when you hold them down with the red button you get these useful navigation options, and pressing the blue button you get the patch info, visit your library, a random function, or you activate the screensaver. The screensaver, by the way, is not just about turning the interface screen off, it's a useful mode for live performance. If you're like me and you're performing live music, you probably don't have a lot of time to also handle the visuals. If you turn on the screensaver, you can set recursion to play through a bunch of presets that you previously made. This is already super powerful, but what's really cool as well is that you can also incorporate some level of randomness, so it's not just playing the presets, but every once in a while it gives you something new. The screen itself is a touchscreen, which I'm usually not a huge fan of, but this one feels pretty good to use. There's also a help section that will give you a ton of information about a given patch, or a particular function, or really anything else you might want to know about. Those are sort of the basic features. Just like with synthesizers, there's a bunch of presets that are great jumping off points for creating your own works. This is my first time using a video synth, so a lot of how this machine thinks was very new to me. The presets on Recursion are super fun to play around with, and you often find yourself going in totally different directions than where the patch started. They've kind of been tailored so that all of the encoders do something useful, and the buttons just make everything animate, which is really nice. Alright, let's dig into the methodology for creating a patch. You can always get back to your home screen by pressing the red button and then home, and then from there you can press create. This page looks a little intense, but it's really just broken up into a couple of small sections. On your top right you have your library. Here I'm just scrolling through my different presets. On the bottom of these presets you can see which engine has created this patch. In this case it's the Fractal engine. On the bottom of the screen are various nodes that go into creating this particular image. You're typically going to have a seed, and I can change the types of seed here by scrolling through my various options, and then pressing the gold encoder down. Other than the seed, the Fractal instrument is made up of these nodes which are all feeding into it to change it in some way. In this case we have the recurse, the color, and the modulate parameters. And I can scroll through for a different recursion, a different type of color, or a different type of modulation. If I press expand on the bottom, you zoom into this node to see what makes up that effect. And from here you can mess around with the effects even more. So for example, I can change this to something else, which causes this to happen. It's really fun just to use this intuitively without knowing exactly what all the functions are, because honestly there are literally hundreds of these functions. It's best just to use your eyes and let those guide you, especially in the beginning when you're just getting up and running. Here's some other presets I made with the Fractal instrument, by the way. Alright, now that you have an idea of how things are sort of laid out, let's take a look at each of the instruments closely. We already looked at Fractal, which creates fractal type imagery. If we're in our Create page, clicking up here on the top left will access our library. And from there, we can click Instruments and disable the visibility of all the other instruments, except for the one we want to take a look at. So here, I'll set all of my other instruments to hidden, and I'll keep Interference, the one we want to take a look at next, visible. Then I can just press back, and we see all of the interference presets that are on the machine. One thing I didn't talk about yet is the macros and the buttons. The macros correspond to our 5 rotary knobs, and the buttons are the pads. When I click either of them, I see what parameters are associated with those buttons. If I click here on the interface, I can go into more of the parameters, but this is more of an advanced feature, and I find that the sort of default values for a lot of these are totally fine, again, just to get up and running. I show this only to illustrate that you can definitely get super deep with this, assigning LFOs and modulation just like you would with any audio synthesizer. The Recursion Studio has MIDI in and out and a whopping 8 CV inputs. You can also have audio input for audio reactivity, so let's take a look at that. I have a track playing from Ableton going into the audio input of the Recursion Studio. And then to configure this properly, go to your home and then click I/O. You should now see the audio being piped in with the volume slider, and you can adjust the gain from here, and intuitively the Recursion Studio will detect the tempo of your song, which is really cool. Entropy also recommends that you keep the Recursion Studio connected to your Wi-Fi system, because there are a lot of updates that they're putting out to improve the system. Like just in the time that I've had this for this demo, there have been 2 firmware updates already, so it's always a good way to keep it updated to the latest and greatest without needing to plug in another cable. Okay, with that set up, let's take a look at the Wavy Boy instrument. This is a 3D instrument that is specifically designed to be controlled by internal LFOs and shows that the synth is capable of 3D rendering. I've got all of my instruments filtered out except for the Wavy Boy, and I'm just going to select one of the patches. Here on the bottom, we can change the type of waveform, the scope, the color, and the modulation pattern. Right off the bat, I'm definitely going to want to remove the axis just so that we can focus on this weird snaking shape. Okay, from here we can play around with some of the other parameters. You have control over the parts of the snake, like how fast it goes, how long it is, zooming in and out, and so on. Wavy Girl is meant to be used with CV visualization and is one of 2 oscilloscopes on the Recursion Studio. I have 2 channels running from the Zadar, which you can see here. I again want to just turn off the grid so that it just looks more like an abstract pattern and not like a utility or something. Once again, I have similar parameters that I can affect both with the scope as well as the wave trace. Super cool to see CV being visualized like this. Alright, the next instrument is Cat Party. As you can see, when I select it, there's a picture of a cat, which is obviously not super usable for a lot of people, but really this is meant to illustrate that you could take any source image, which is the cat module, and affect it in some way, which is the party module. You can actually import your own images using a USB stick, or you can have a camera feed coming into the Recursion Studio. So here I'm going to take this image from HR Giger and run some effects on top of it. All right, the last instrument we'll take a look at is the Hyperflux. This one's really cool. Now that you generally know how the synth is laid out, I'll just play around and let the results speak for themselves. The Recursion Studio is an amazing synth to start exploring the world of creating visuals for your live set, especially if you're just getting into the world of video synthesis. Let me know what you think of the box in the comments, and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. See you next time.